Joe, why are we out here killing squirrels on national television? Have you seen?
That's what you open with?
I mean, the first thing I get on social media before the show, and it's about this damn squirrel that died.
You're a little late to that. That was the talking. Now everyone was talking about that over the weekend. Where were you?
Well, you know where I was?
Justice for Peanut, man.
Well, there's two things that I was doing. I was at a 2-year-old's birthday party. By the way, baby Jules' 2-year-old birthday party. Absolutely fantastic. Bluey all over the place. Your boy was watching college football in a bye week, because another team, there's another team I cover that we're going to talk about here tonight too. Big week for them. But, dude, I had a cheat day for the first time on Carnivore in a long time. Since I was in New York, day since I was in New York with you, okay? Brother pigged out. And you know what? I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be like 5 pounds heavier. Like, I ate that much food.
Was it all cake or were you eating anything else?
No, ate no sweets. Like egg casserole. My wife gets the sausage, the eggs, the cheese, the hash browns.
I'm jealous. That sounds good.
I'm like, here we go. Okay. And so I missed it. And then all day Saturday, we were just sitting outside on our back patio watching games. We have a big TV out there. By the way, that's why you need to come to Louisiana for one of these games.
I'm coming eventually, man. I'm coming eventually.
You have a personal place you can stay here, clearly. So, okay. So, long story short, I got to sit out all day, cool air, watching college football the way that God intended it. And so now I'm seeing this damn squirrel. So, yes, I did miss it. College football, prep for the show on Sunday, and then we got Peanut dying. That's all I got to say, man. A squirrel.
Peanut should have been number one in your priorities for keeping up with. But, of course, we're not here to talk about squirrels.
I feel bad because me and my dad used to shoot squirrels all the time. So maybe I shouldn't feel that bad.
A little different. That was a domesticated squirrel, so it's a little different.
Yeah, you could ask Luis Ruffino. I mean, your boy, triple shotgun. Pow up in that thing. All right, nevertheless, Georgia and Ole Miss, massive game in the SEC. LSU, Joe and Alabama, and Vandy in South Carolina. If I would have told you in the beginning of the season that a pretty big matchup in the SEC would be Vandy and South Carolina.
Hold on. I wouldn't classify it as, and look, South Carolina fans, you can keep complaining all you want. I don't care. I would not classify South Carolina Vandy as a big matchup.
Okay, can I give you a hypothetical?
A team with 2 good records in the SEC? Yeah, sure. But it's the equivalent of I'm trying to think, if Iowa and Wisconsin faced off like they did last week. It's the equivalent of that. It's the same thing.
What's Vandy's record?
They're 5-3.
Okay. Let's just say hypothetically they win this game and they're 6-3.
Don't. Are you about to say some playoff picture shit? They're not getting into the playoff. Neither is South Carolina. Neither of them have a shot at the playoff. All I'm
saying is they're not mathematically completely out of it.
Well, there's no math that goes into qualifying. It's just a matter of how everybody.
You get what I'm trying to say. If we
I know.
Here, let me give you an example. Okay, hypothetical example. Would you take Vandy over the second best Big 12 team right now?
Yeah, but the second best Big 12 team is not going to get into the playoff. No, actually, I think Vanderbilt's comparable to the second best Big 12.
All right, let me ask you another hypothetical question. Is Vandy the second or third best team in the ACC? Because there's something
they're probably just as good as Clemson is.
Okay, so now we're getting
probably a little worse.
Where you said something earlier in the season that I laughed at, and I shouldn't have laughed at you. Now I got to come out here and agree with your crazy ass. I can see a path for a 9-3 team getting in here because of two of the 4 power conferences being down, Joe.
I actually, because that was my take originally, I don't agree with that now because I think
the inverse has happened.
Yeah, I think that the way that the season is shaping up, where we're going to have one ACC team with Miami, we're going to have one Big 12 team, pick whatever team you want out of a hat. Notre Dame is not going to, probably won't finish worse than 10-2, and a 10-2 Notre Dame team will probably get priority over, say, a 9-3 Vanderbilt. that leaves 8 remaining spots. The way that those remaining SEC and Big Ten teams, how far they've gotten this year.
A team like Vandy, as an example, let's say LSU wins this weekend, hypothetically.
LSU is the more realistic team to be in that conversation.
They also play Vandy, right? So that part's gonna play itself out. But there could be a hypothetical situation where you got Vandy and LSU that might have playoff implications. I'm dead serious right now. I'm dead serious.
It'll have playoff implications for LSU. It will not have playoff implications for Vandy.
I don't know. They went out. They beat LSU and Tennessee down the stretch.
I just don't think a 3-loss team. For a 3-loss team to get in, they would need to have multiple top 15 wins.
If Vandy were to win out, they would have 3 top 10 wins. Yeah, they would. At the time that they played. Alabama.
No, not at the time that they played them. I don't think that's not how building that resume works.
What was NIU ranked when they were?
That has nothing to do with what we're talking about here.
Oh, okay. Don't kill my Vandy high right now. All right. Anyway,
zero chance of getting in the playoff.
Too much time on Vandy. 2 games that do have implications on it. Joe, we'll lead off tonight. Georgia and Ole Miss.
Yeah, that game. I'm leaning Georgia right now. I don't think that Ole Miss has. They don't have the coaching staff to go up against Georgia, and that's gonna be the big talking point that I get to when we get to that preview. Can Lane get over the hump? And we thought that James Franklin could do it. And I don't think this is going to be the year that they get that job done.
You just don't want to get James Franklin.
Well, no, it's not a matter of getting James Franklin. It's being reminded that having the better coaching staff in a game where there's close margins always shows up, especially when said coach can't beat top 10 teams.
Doesn't matter. Billy Napier could have knocked off Kirby and them last week.
Okay, that's a big if. That's a big fat if. It's a big if. Okay, well, it was the first quarter and then DJ Lagway went down with an injury. That is a huge, enormous if.
Pause. They're down 7 with 3 minutes left to go. Stop, number 1. Number 2, Carson.
Wait, what? Wait. They were down 7 with 3 minutes left to go in the game.
Florida was down. Yes, they were.
Florida was down 7. I think even Georgia was.
No. Florida is down 7 with 3 minutes left to go. They throw a pick. Okay, so hold on. If Carson Beck does what he's been doing and throwing interceptions to other teams, he cannot do that to Ole Miss. There's a level of this where we better stop very quickly and in our tracks that you let a third-string quarterback from Yale have the ball last to tie you. I don't care what you think about Ole Miss right now. Do that to them and see what happens. I'm not playing around with Georgia.
But as we know with Georgia, though, that they come out and play different levels every single time that they match up with opponents. They have been playing down to their opponents. The Kentucky game was nowhere near the level of performance they had against Texas.
You're not playing down to the level of your opponent when you have 3 interceptions against Alabama, 3 interceptions against Texas, and 3 interceptions against Florida.
They had 3 interceptions. He had interceptions against Texas, but they still played a dominant game and they handedly beat Texas. My whole point here is that they played down to Florida, they played down to Kentucky while the game was close. They're not going to play down to Ole Miss. Just like Ohio State played down to Nebraska, and Ohio State had slow stretch.
You're missing the point.
No, I'm not. I understand exactly what you're saying.
You're missing the point.
No, I'm not.
If you turn the ball over, eventually you get clipped. It's the bottom line. Joe, they would have been, think about this. They would have beaten multiple teams, 3 teams with 9 picks if he does it again. It's not happening. You can get that out of your dome piece right now. If you think that you're going to throw 3 picks to Lane Kiffin,
I'm not okay, but you're making a huge assumption that he's going to throw 3 interceptions.
No, I'm not, because against every ranked opponent this year, he's thrown 3 picks besides Clemson. Literally. So he's got 4 games where he has a ranked opponent, and 3 of them he's thrown 9 picks. Spare me that I'm making an assumption at the current moment.
You are making an assumption. Yes, it has been happening. My point that I'm trying to bring up here is that Georgia as a football team has played up to their biggest matchups. When they played Clemson, when they played Ole Miss, they didn't play great against Alabama, but they still finished in the second half. He played like shit in that game as well. That is going to be a huge talking point. It's going to be a huge talking point in this preview. But I just think it's a little bit assumptive to predict that he's going to have picks and that's going to cost him the football game. Plenty of guys
Joe, if I have 3 games where you have done it, at some point you got to get over this assumption. That's not assumption, my brother. Assumption is the word when you have 1 or less. Reality is when you have 3 or more. Sorry to tell you, like that's the literal Oxford definition of assumption. Less than 1. I'm assuming this one person did X or Y. If he would have had one of them and I would have said this isn't his nature, he's out of it. Actually, it's what we did when he did it against Alabama. And we came right out and says, yeah, he's just not going to do that again. And then he did it twice. So don't, again, y'all going to miss me on this one. We about to have a hell of a segment. All right.
Okay.
LSU and Alabama, Joe, we'll talk about that one here tonight as well.
Yeah. Massive implications. This is a playoff game. We were talking jokingly, not very seriously, about LSU Vandy being a playoff implication game, but this 1,000% is.
We'll see. I've been talking about. I literally had 7 radio hits today. I'm exhausted. I'm literally exhausted. Can't do it anymore.
Welcome to the club.
All right, let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. Go over there, use your mobile device today to sign up. Use that promo code BELIEVE50. Joe, I had somebody last week said they used the promo code. And guess who they bet on when they sent it to me? It was LSU versus Ole Miss, and they took LSU the point.
Made some money.
Yeah, they made some money. So you can use that promo code BELIEVE50. You'll get 50% off on your first deposit. All right, let's do this, Joe. Let's talk about our good friends over at BetOnline. We come back and break down these 3 games next. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. We're back. All right. So let's get to it here. Big game in the SEC this weekend in Oxford, Ole Miss versus Georgia. Joe, we were kind of talking about this in the preview of this, so we're going to probably rehash this so we can clip it and get it up and all that. Your thoughts on this game?
Look, I understand a lot of people that would be quick to be worried about Georgia stepping into this matchup. I understand that a lot of people would be feeling that Ole Miss going into that game on the road after they played the way that they did against Florida. But I'm not worried. I'm not worried about Georgia because of the way that they've played against bad opponents, the way that they've stepped up to the plate against their bigger opponents on the schedule, the way that they finished in the second half against Alabama. This Georgia team, like we've spent weeks saying, is still worthy of being the favorite for the national championship. Yes, Carson Beck needs to play cleaner, but they still, and I turn to that being an issue for Mike Bobo more than it is an issue for Carson Beck. He has a very difficult challenge, though, Blake. He's going up against the best defensive line in the country, which so far this season, this elite group led by J.J. Pegues, Walter Nolan, Jared Ivey, Princely Umami-Ellen, they've got 41 freaking sacks on the year. So that offensive line for Georgia has to play great. They need to establish the run early. They need to keep pressure off of Carson Beck's shoulders. And Carson Beck, when he does drop back, needs to make better decisions. Biggest storyline on Ole Miss's side, though, Blake, before you jump in here, Lane's got to call his best game. Lane, every single time they step into premier matchups, last year against Georgia, against Alabama, this year against LSU, play calling's not been as good as it's supposed to be. They do not seem as prepared as they should. They seem sloppy in all of these big matchups. And that to me is the biggest driving force in this is can Lane get his guys ready when he has failed to do so in many opportunities since being at Ole Miss.
What's going to be the status of Trey Harris? I have no idea. So to your point, I don't, when I talk about this on a Monday, I don't know this. If he goes or if he doesn't go, regardless to me, Joe, there's an underlying weakness in all of this. And it has nothing to do with anybody besides Carson Beck. Nobody. Joe, I don't care what anybody on the here's how I truly feel at the current moment. Now, Georgia fans, you feel this, okay? But from a national landscape, because they're winning, I don't think we're talking about this enough. Joe, again, the last 3 times, or at least last 2 times that I've seen Carson Beck, he has 6 picks. Now, he's gotten better in both second halves when the game slowed down. But regardless of whose fault it is, even if you take Carson Beck out of the equation and say it's all play calling, which is not true, but even if you did, Joe, they're turning the ball over way too much. And if Georgia doesn't turn the ball over, you're right. Like what we saw last week, they can assert dominance defensively. They're still one of the best defenses in the country. Just look at what they're doing the last couple of weeks. The bottom line, though, is, Joe, if you take both labels off of this, and I told you, regardless of the team, you know for a fact that the last 3 games that you've played, you have 8 total turnovers. Joe, you would come out here and say, regardless of who that is, you're turning the ball over way too much. I get what you're saying. And their defense is going to keep them in any game, regardless if that continues to go on. The problem is, I'm halfway through the season, and you said establish the run. Joe, it's not in their DNA right now. As a team.
Wait, but it can be, and this is why I'm getting so freaking frustrated about this.
No, if they ran for over 150 yards in this game against that defensive line, what they would have done in the realm of you went up against that front 7 that's second in the country in run defense, you would have done something abnormal. Right? Because they're not running. So they're 97th in the country in rush yards. 97th. So I'm halfway through a season. I can come out here and continue to say, establish the run, establish the run. They're not doing it. They refuse in some instances to do it. It's the biggest complaint about what people are talking about with Bobo. Okay, oh, well, you got this problem and that problem. No, you're Georgia. Line up and bust them in the mouth. That's what you should be doing. But they're not. I'm over halfway of a season, and they can't establish it. I am not saying Georgia's losing this.
But hold on. It's not that they can't establish it. It's they're choosing not to.
Regardless.
Okay.
That's literally how I opened up all of this. Regardless of how, they want to, they can't. They can't. You think they're going to find it against Ole Miss?
It's not a matter of finding it. Again, they're choosing not to. They're one of the lowest teams in rush play percentage for the amount for the plays that they're calling. There's numbers.
Regardless, from a schematical standpoint or actually doing it standpoint, that any way that you talk about this, that they figure it out. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Wait, but why though? There's no reason behind it not happening. All it comes down to is Bobo first and second down to stop throwing the freaking ball.
Going up against the best team in the SEC and defending the run.
Look,
that's how I know.
Ole Miss has a very talented front 7. Like, there's a lot of guys that are going to get NFL opportunities. I was texting with a buddy about Chris Paul Jr., who is maybe the best linebacker in the SEC that doesn't get enough recognition and love for how great he's played this season. But we also have to contextualize that number, the rush yards per game that they're allowing, who they've gone up against. They went up against South Carolina's offensive line, which is terrible, and they feasted on them. They went up against LSU, who chooses not to run in their own right. And they went up against Oklahoma, who has had no life at all on offense. And then Arkansas was an impressive performance that they had. That I will give credit for. All I'm just trying to say here is that's a really good run defense, but there's no reason to believe stepping into this matchup that Georgia won't be able to find success running the football. They got Tate Ratledge back. Their offensive line can be good and can pay.
So what's their excuse about not running the ball effectively against Florida?
They chose not to. They had 40 passing attempts.
So listen to what I'm saying. Listen.
I am.
To what I'm saying. Okay, you are right. Regardless if they want to or if they don't do it at all. But either Bobo's not going to call it enough or they're not going to be able to establish it. Either way, he has not shown you. It would still be out of the norm. It'd still be out of the norm. And I promise you this, if you continue to look and do some of the things that you're doing offensively, this is how you're going to get clipped. From an on-scale coaching player aspect, they should win this football game, regardless of where it is. But the bottom line is, when you have teams turning the ball over and can't run, whether you want to or not want to, I don't care what it is, you're not running the football effectively, regardless. That is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for disaster. It's how you get clipped. That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay.
If Ole Miss clips them, it's because of Jackson Dart is better than Carson Beck right now.
Well, right. And to move past this yelling at each other here, that is where the game is won. Is if and Jackson Dart has played phenomenally. Like there is no inflation in his stats. Jackson Dart has played fantastic to this part of the year. I said, and a lot of people were criticizing the way that he played against Kentucky. He wasn't the reason why they lost. He played a good game. They chose not to run the football, and he was going up against the defense that was just dropping everybody into coverage, and he had to sit and roam and try to find somebody to throw the football to. He has been fantastic this year, especially statistically with some of the big plays that he's had in these games, and we saw what he did against Arkansas last week. We know that Jackson Dart's the better decision maker between the two. It's just a matter of how often is Carson Beck being placed in these situations? How often is he placed in 3rd and long? How often is he placed in spots where he has to make the big play? And we know that at current moment, more often than not, he's messing up. He is making bad, brutal decisions. Ole Miss wins this game by making big plays, by getting sacks, by putting Georgia in these really tough, stressful inflection points where they have to call on Carson Beck to make the plays. And it's part of, not to rehash, I'm just putting this in here. It's part of what I have talked about with Bobo is that he's putting him in these situations when he doesn't have to. He's asking him to drop back and attack downfield past the sticks, and he doesn't have to. To move past that, if Georgia can manufacture him having to on 3rd and medium, 3rd and long, make plays, they win the football game.
You're a quarterback apologist.
I'm not a quarterback apologist.
You're a quarterback apologist. The problem with your logic at the current moment, okay, if this were anybody besides Ole Miss, I'd probably agree with you on some of the things that you're talking about. I actually do agree with you. Ole Miss is 91st in the country in passing yards allowed. Seeing them up close and personal a couple of weeks ago, Joe, their secondary is very bad. It can be exploited. I understand what you're saying and actually fundamentally agree with what you're saying. I don't know if this is the week to go away from what potentially Bobo's plan is, right? Like, Joe, I mean, Garrett Nussmeier doesn't throw those 2 interceptions and make boneheaded decisions. I mean, Georgia can find ways to attack them through the air. It's not like it's just LSU. Like, I look at what they've done. They had a great win last week. Can't take it away from them. Again, that secondary is very leaky. And if you do call a game like Bobo, I can see where things can happen. Again, you're giving up too many yards if you're that secondary of Ole Miss. To your point about the first thing in reference to Jackson Dart playing well, we're not talking about him not having a running game, right? We've talked about Beck. We've talked about Nussmeier. We've talked about at times who's the what's his name at Arkansas? Taylon Green. We've talked about Nico, okay, and some of the issues that he's had with drops. Everybody's gotten the excuse besides Jackson Dart, and he's been consistent pretty much every week. I mean, really and truthfully, probably he's playing the most consistent in the SEC right now, if we're just calling all things considered, because he's not turning the ball over. He's doing what he's doing, throwing the football. He's been highly consistent. So
has there been let me ask you this question. Jackson Dart, do you think he's been the best quarterback in the SEC this season?
Tough question, because when you say that, people are like, oh, there's no way. And I'm like, then who
would put over him?
Yeah, who is at the current moment? I mean, maybe he's Milroe, because, again, people don't realize how big these turnovers are at the current moment, right? Like, I mean, let's just be real with Nussmeier and Beck and Green. Like, they're freak athletes. They do good things, but, I mean, come on. So, look, I agree with your game plan. I just in reference to the game, I would tell Beck I'd let him have it again, because if there's one weakness that they have as a team, it's being leaky in the secondary.
That's fair. I want to just reiterate something that we didn't really spend a ton of time talking about, and I don't know about you, but for me, what Georgia's biggest strength in this situation, biggest advantage, 1000% has to be coaching staff. And like, that's not a hot take. That's not some original thing.
Yeah.
Lane Kiffin has continued to fail in these situations. If he comes out, like, Kentucky's the perfect example this year, outside of what I brought up earlier, LSU. The game plan was terrible. His in-game coaching was horrible. He overcoaches sometimes in his head. He's a brilliant coach. I will never say that Lane Kiffin's a bad coach. He overcoaches. He overthinks things way too much. For me, another big part of this is like, will he do that again? And if he does, I mean, they're cooked. It's going to be just like last year.
Yeah, I mean, for Lane, you would like to see him not press as much. The only thing, though, Joe, is it is interesting because Lane's back is very much up against the corner right now, right? From a perception standpoint, from a team standpoint. Joe, they lose this game, they're out of the playoff. And it's why I feel that Georgia's going to win this game. Like, I do. Okay, and I want to make this very well known. I don't like this situation Georgia's in right now. I don't. Because when I look at Ole Miss, this isn't your grandpappy's Ole Miss. This isn't your daddy's Ole Miss. They have dudes defensively. Yeah. And they're good enough offensively, Joe, that if you're right, if Lane doesn't press, they're going to pop them. Okay? And Georgia fans are going to get pissed. And listen, I need to see you play turnover-free football. It's what I need to see. Because, Joe, until then, I think they're too vulnerable. But the problem that I have in saying that is that I look at them defensively like, all right, they figured something out. Something's there. Can they keep Carson Beck upright is a big question mark too, Joe. I don't think that Georgia tackle position is as good as what we saw or Ole Miss saw when they didn't have a second against LSU. We'll just have to wait and see here. But I'm going to pick Georgia. I just think, Joe, that finally Carson Beck finds something in the second half against Ole Miss, and that secondary is just too bad for Ole Miss right now to give Georgia the win here.
Yeah, and just to repeat what I mentioned earlier, close margins here. Like, this is a very evenly matched game. I know Georgia fans might not want to hear that or be told that they're close with a team like Ole Miss, but very close margins. You're going on the road and you're dealing with a situation where your quarterback's been turning the ball over a ton. This game is very evenly matched. It's 50-50 down the middle. I think it could go either way. And in a situation like that, you have to go with the team with the better coaching staff. We literally watched it happen this past week with an almost identical situation, except for Kirby Smart's far more decorated and successful than Ryan Day is. So there's even more reason to lean on Georgia in the situation. And the final part is something that we talked about going into the Texas game, Blake. I don't know what it is with these. When we preview Georgia, you and I yell at each other so much. I'm remembering, Mac, you and I screaming at each other during that Georgia-Texas preview. But when we talked about that preview, part of what I brought up was Kirby's too good of a coach to let the bad game against Alabama leak into other weeks against their biggest games on the schedule. He's just too good of a coach.
There right now, not with this team. I cannot go there because
but Carson Beck played like ass. He played like ass against Texas, and their defense won them the football game. Ole Miss's offensive line is worse than Texas's.
That's fine. Okay, defensively, that's the issue. You're right. The defense has stepped up to the plate. But, Joe, it mind boggles me sometimes. Maybe I'm too much and putting too much emphasis on turnovers. Maybe
turnovers are important. Turnovers are important to talk about.
You're going to get clipped by somebody. You shouldn't get clipped by if you keep doing it. That's all I'm saying.
I get that.
100% it's going to happen. I don't care where it is.
I get that. And the reason why the difference in our opinions on why we're arguing on this so much is that the game doesn't live and die based on how Carson Beck plays. Because we've seen multiple times this year where he's had multiple interceptions.
It does against a team,
and they've still won.
But it does against a team like this. Because here's the thing
Texas is better than Ole Miss, and they went on the road and beat Texas.
Are you're 1,000% sure about that?
Yes, I am 1,000% sure about
Jackson
that.
Dart over Quinn Ewers any day of the week and twice on Saturday.
Oh, I agree with that part, but
okay. I mean, where's Texas better than them defensively at the current moment?
In the secondary.
Okay. But they're not better in their front seven.
They're not better on their defensive line. I think that Texas is better at linebacker. They're better at safety, and they're better at corner. And they can't be better at D-line because the Texas D-line is very young. Both teams don't have a good run game. Both have underperforming offensive lines. I mean, they're similar.
I mean, Ole Miss is still second in the country in total offense. It's not like, I mean, and we're talking about them being, hold on for just a second. We're talking about Ole Miss being bad for just a moment. They're still second in total offense.
That's the word. We didn't say they were bad. I don't want to hear any Ole Miss fans claim
just clarify, because I mean,
no.
I think Ole Miss has been much more competitive throughout the year than Texas.
They have been, but I would argue that Ole Miss has played a far easier schedule to this point compared to most SEC teams.
No, they haven't.
The only hard team that Ole Miss has played so far this year is LSU. Texas has played Vanderbilt and Georgia, and Oklahoma's not a tough game, but
I don't know about that.
Their non-conference schedule so far this year has also been tougher because I understand that Michigan's a mess.
Coming into the SEC, got Mississippi State, Vandy, and Georgia. So outside of the Georgia game, they got two. When you come into the season, I mean, come on.
Ole Miss has played basically the same. We're wasting too much time on this because we got to get to the other previews.
LSU and Alabama this week, Joe. Well, we got a super chat. Okay, hold on. Before we get to that one, Brooklyn Boy with a $2 super chat says, "Where do y'all think Carson Beck going to get drafted?"
I've talked to some people. He's not a first rounder. He's played himself out of the first round. His decision making, and the biggest problem is first round quarterbacks get drafted because you believe that they can rise the level of performance of your team. They can step up the level of performance of everybody around them. He's just not that guy. He's an early second round pick. He could be Derek Carr, who I know that you love.
Don't ever say that name on this show ever again.
By the way, you better be nice to Darren Rizzi. I don't want to hear you say anything mean about Darren Rizzi.
I hadn't said anything. It's not his fault. It's not his fault.
I'm watching you. You better be nice to Darren Rizzi.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Former Rhody Ram. He's a former Rhode Island.
I'm going to be on his ass now because all you some bitches suck. All right. Let's get back on point.
Yeah.
LSU and Alabama this week, Joe. This game, as always, in the SEC, had high stakes on it. This year, no different. Just in a little different ramification in the sense of Nick Saban is not going to be there. I would tell you that, Nick not being here, and now that the LSU and Alabama game is finally here, it feels a little bit weird for someone who's highly anticipated that game over the last 20 years of his life. So I would say, of course it does. LSU and Alabama has massive stakes here. A playoff are at stakes here. Your thoughts on the game going into it?
First of all, I love that this game does have such serious implications on it because it just elevates the drama. No Nick Saban, but this game ends up being so huge for the future of the season. This is a playoff, play-in game to the truest extent. Both these squads need it. Separate from that, and there's a couple of things in the nitty-gritty to get into in this matchup, Blake, and here's the kiss of death. I'm sorry. I have to do it. I'm so sorry. I'm not doing this.
You're picking against them?
I'm not doing this deliberately. No,
You're picking Alabama, please, God.
No, I'm not. Alabama has been too sloppy. Alabama has been too sloppy to this point to come in on the road in the hardest road environment in the country. And it was something that I stupidly did not lean into when Ole Miss came to play at LSU. The crowd got to Ole Miss. Like, that was very visible. Talk about not stepping up in a big matchup. Lane Kiffin couldn't do it. As much as I think that Kalen DeBoer in the future is going to get this team right and that this team has the trajectory of being in a dominant program in the SEC, year 2 is going to be huge. I don't see, with the amount of bad offensive line, or inconsistent rather, not bad, but inconsistent offensive line play, the amount of penalties that they're averaging per game, their offense, their defense has slowed down on a week-to-week basis. It just feels very off for me to say that Alabama is going to come in on the road and beat LSU.
I had to change my entire take now. I got to.
Well, you thought you're gonna be yelling at me? You thought that was
no. I got to take it. No, I was cheering that you were going to take Bama.
I don't come into arguments trying to lose. I don't try coming into arguments, ready to lose fights with you. I don't care about the outcome of the game. I care if you and I have a good argument.
You care. As a Notre Dame fan, you care about every Brian Kelly game. Don't tell me that you don't.
I don't. No, I care if LSU wins more for your well-being and knowing that you're in a good mood.
I'll come in here pissed off.
Yeah.
All right. Reality of this game. Joe, there are a lot of questions that I do have coming into it. Here's what I'm going to say about Alabama. I came into the beginning of the season saying that defensive line and your front seven teams are going to run on you. Joe, they're 67th in the country in run defense. Now, LSU can't run the football to save their life, but here's one thing I do know. They ran for 150 against UCLA. UCLA's 11th in the country in run defense. What I'd say is that when they choose to run and actually try to deliberately do things, they actually do have success. The problem is that this is not the front seven of Nick Saban. It's not.
Can I just very quickly interject with a stat that I have to support that? LSU this season is 130th in rush play percentage, but they're 29th in rush EPA. So that means they're deliberately choosing not to run the football, and they're still in the top quarter of teams in the country in being able to produce success at running the football. So they're an enigma. So continue what you were saying, but that is probably one of the weirdest things I've found.
Thank you for that stat. Okay.
You're welcome.
Very, very much. Thank you for it, because I'm now get to use that. There's one massive question that LSU's got to answer. Can you stop a running quarterback? Bottom line. I mean, now you talked about Alabama, so I'm going to talk about this later tonight. Inconsistent O-line play, Joe, they're 82nd in the country and giving up sacks, and that's with a running quarterback. You're right. And by the way, I'm just going to tell you, from a pass rush standpoint, you do not want to be finding yourself against Blake Baker and that front four for LSU. Joe, they're 6th in the country in sacks. They're going to get after you. We think of a running quarterback, and we think about, he used his legs during the passing game. No, that Marcel Reed didn't do that. Teams haven't done that. It's been when you're just running simple zone, they keep making up stupid errors, and one guy gets beat, and they're off to the races. I think LSU's got to find a run game, okay? And in the inverse of that, can you stop Jalen Milroe? It's all going to come back down to which team's biggest weakness at moments has the biggest moment, okay? Which one stands up the most? Because I think that this team is pretty even in a lot of different areas, really. Yeah. Athlete to athlete, coach to coach. So it comes down to probably yet again the play that will be up front. And the question becomes is who do you trust more in that? Do you trust the front of LSU or the front of Alabama? And if you trust one or the other, that's who I think you should lean here. Now, I feel like I would trust LSU's a little bit more, but I also have seen them falter along the interior of their offensive line.
To extrapolate more on discussing
you love that word, extrapolate. I'm gonna have to start using that.
Extrapolate. It's important to discuss both lines of scrimmage in this game because I think that this is 1,000% one of those games that will be won or lost based on which unit, offensive line, defensive line, plays better. And so far this year, Alabama's pass rush, which looked really good at the start of the season, they've really slowed down. They've only produced 18 sacks in total this season. LSU, we know they've only allowed 2. They're the best offensive line in the country right now. They're protecting Garrett Nussmeier.
4 now. It's 4 because Garrett took. Anyway, continue.
The LSU team website says 2. Okay. Okay. To what I was saying though, that is something that legitimately is concerning because if Alabama can't get home, and that's what teams that were able to not get home, but at least generate pressures, Texas A&M, and like Ole Miss did a little bit where Garrett Nussmeier threw some of those interceptions. If you can't get those pressures, Nussmeier is going to pick you apart. He's capable of doing it. He doesn't do great at times against pressure. I think he actually is one of the best quarterbacks in the country I saw in terms of like production and against pressure. But they have to get home. And I don't have faith right now in Alabama in being able to do that.
And I don't have a lot of faith that LSU can be a 4-quarter football team. I don't.
It's a very good point. It's a very,
okay,
and that's really a very underrated thing to bring up if we're getting like really into the weeds here.
Yeah, very into the weeds. Joe, they're an SEC championship contender in one half and a dud in the next. Pick which one they're going to do it in. And it's not just in the SEC that's happening to them too. Look at the second half against South Alabama. They've been doing this against UCLA. They did it against UCLA. Joe, what team is going? Can they hold on? They did it against Ole Miss, and LSU held on enough to have heroics, right? So, look, man, regardless of when it's going to happen, here's one thing that I know for sure about this LSU team that I'm very confident in. I know there's going to be a half where they're probably going to suck a little. I also know that there's going to be a half that they're going to whip your ass. And so how do you maintain that? They're doing it against everybody. You know who else does that same exact thing too?
Who?
Alabama. They come out and play a very shitty half. And I'm talking about very shitty. Then all of a sudden, like first half versus Tennessee. Joe, they made some mistakes. It's a really good Tennessee defense. Second half, 3 points. That's where you're struggling, brother. That like both of them are doing the same exact thing. So again, when I'm talking about point for point, who do you trust more? Where are you at on the trust factor in this? Here's what I'd say from a stadium standpoint. You know I'm not going to steer you wrong on this.
Yeah. No, I know you won't.
Shit's about to get weird.
You said that before Ole Miss, so I trust you with that.
So we had our good buddy Chris Phillips on from SEC Unfiltered.
Okay.
And I told him, I was like, all right, come to Ole Miss and see what happens. How does Kalen DeBoer react to that? Because their losses have come on the road. Both of their losses are on the road. At Nashville and in Knoxville, and now you're going to the scariest place to play. Miss me on you think that I have fandom. I will pay for you a ticket to come down here to tell me that I'm wrong in a certain situation about that place at night. By the way, October is for November's for contenders. This is who it all comes down to. Which coach is going to lead their team to be a contender? Which coach is going to be a pretender and get out of this one? Because it's win or go home, brother.
To wrap the thoughts on this game, I mean, you just hit the nail on the head from the narrative perspective. The winner of this game is establishing themselves as earning that playoff spot. There's no fake winner of this game. Whoever wins this football game, sure, they could slip up at a later point, but I find that highly unlikely. This is a momentum builder. This is a trajectory changer that sets you on a path to go to the college football playoff and maybe potentially to win a game or two during that path. Both these teams, it seems unlikely that they're going to be in the SEC championship game, but this still is so critical for rebuilding that confidence to know that you're one of the best teams in the country.
Last thing I'm going to say, in both road environments, whether it be Vandy or Tennessee, Alabama did not rush for over 85 yards. They had 75 against Tennessee and 84 against Vandy. LSU has been streaky. I think Vandy's going to get a long run on them. It's just in LSU's DNA at this exact moment. But I do think that is I think it's a massive factor because a lot of people sleep on that front seven of LSU too in certain instances, and they come out after a bye week.
Yeah.
Here's another question, but final thought I got. I'm going to talk about this all week, but I mean, just for this show, what does Brian Kelly do after a loss? What has he done at home at Tiger Stadium? He's 13-0 at night in Tiger Stadium so far. It's a tough place.
It's a good stat.
Tough place to be in. Joe, they don't lose here at night. They just don't. The best that they look is when they're at home at night under Brian Kelly. For what it's worth.
When was the last time they lost at home at night?
Auburn, maybe. Well, and Orgeron's last year. Auburn, I think, maybe.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it was Auburn. But ever since that Auburn loss, they've beaten everybody. I mean, think of Bama 2 years ago. They won them the West. I mean, Joe, I was literally holding a newborn in one hand and writing down things on the other. Just goes to tell you how time flies. All right. South Carolina and Vandy here, Joe. I'm going to say it. A really good matchup this week in the SEC. How do you see this one playing out between Vandy and South Carolina?
Look, I'm just going to be completely honest here, Blake.
Oh, don't do it.
Freaking idea. No. I have no freaking idea. I don't, because neither of these teams have done anything predictable. They haven't, because the times where we've said South Carolina could really pull this one out, then they show up and play the way that they did against Ole Miss, or they don't finish the way that they did against Alabama. And then the games where we're saying, I specifically and others were certainly doing this as well, Texas A&M, real shot here to win this football game. Kentucky, they're going to smoke them. At the beginning of the year, they played their best football games. They dominated their opponents. And the same thing applies here for Vanderbilt, where they play fantastic in spurts throughout these games, where they randomly climb back in and then fall back out of it. They are the most chaotic team in all of college football. Both of these teams are. So it's hard for me, Blake, to provide a prediction for this. The only thing that I could tell you here is which quarterback has the biggest impact on the football game. Because Vanderbilt's offensive line is great. We know how dominant South Carolina's defensive line is. They're going to get home. Can Diego Pavia do Diego Pavia things that Marcel Reed couldn't do? Evade pressure and make big plays. And can we see Lenore Sellers dominate in the run game again?
Yeah, I think you're right. Is this a turning page for Lenore Sellers? Does he go like trying to think? You know, he doesn't get the praise that he deserves for how freakish of an athlete he is. I mean, I think we saw that last week. I mean, we saw him have a 75-yard touchdown run. We just thought, you know, I don't know what we thought. Joe, how does South Carolina react to coming off an emotional win against Texas A&M?
Right.
You had a blank there for a second. I think that's really pretty much to me what's in this game. Like, can Kentucky can South Carolina put together 2 straight weeks where they look like a good football team? I mean, that really is it. Because athlete v. athlete, I'm taking South Carolina all day long and twice on Saturday. Like, if you're just lining me up on paper.
Yeah. You're 100% right for saying that, but the problem is, though, is that
you wouldn't let me get to my butt or
sorry,
my
finish. Sorry, I completely blew up your climax. I blew up your climax. Finish your point. Sorry, I got excited.
You literally like answered the phone during my climax.
I tried to steal your however. I'm a bad person. I'm sorry.
Chris Phillips is going to be pissed. We just got done talking about. He's going to be pissed.
We got to clip this and send this to him. What were you going to say? I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. That was bad on my part.
I've never been so like hurt to not be able to use a however. But
say however. Go ahead.
However, as much praise as I gave Shane Beamer this week, now he's got to show that he can, like, okay, let's sustain it. Now, he did say something interesting 2 weeks ago, Joe, where it kind of was a little bit of a turn for their season. He came out before the Oklahoma game and said, listen, we had a team meeting, and we all looked at each other in the face and just said, hey, man, F it. Like, let's just go play. Just go play. Let's play some backyard football. We'll scheme some things up. Let's be a tough football team. They dominated Oklahoma. I get it. It's Oklahoma. Like, I get it. But then they did it to A&M. And the question becomes, Joe, I do think that you find these random pocket teams that, like, find something. You got a young team. Joe, they got a really young football team on the offensive side of the football. Outside of Rocket Sanders, Joe, pretty much everybody comes back, right? Like a young team that's finding themselves. So how do they react to that? If they react the way that I think that they have the capability of doing, Joe, they're going to beat Vandy. I mean, like, I love the Vandy story. I get all that. They got the dudes to go in there and win, and they should. But I don't know if I can trust that you have a good enough culture to sustain how well you played a week ago, if that makes sense.
What I was going to jump in and say is in line with that, is that Vanderbilt is the killer of when you're not focused. And you're right. Like, they're we don't have enough evidence. Like we haven't seen Shane Beamer have enough of these big games and how they've responded after it, because the rest of this season and the most of his time at South Carolina, they have lost a lot of close games that they could have potentially pulled out upsets. The reason why I want to bring this up, though, is like Vanderbilt, they don't have the better athletes in any of the matchups that they've played in. They don't have the better recruits. They have the better scheme in every matchup, and they have more will from all of their players.
Can I really interrupt you?
Go ahead.
I don't know if that's true about their defensive line either.
Meaning Vanderbilt's D line?
Yeah, because here's the truth. I've seen it against Bama and I've seen it against Texas. Joe, they kind of dominated that D line kind of dominated at moments, if we're just being frank.
But there's no draft prospects, at least that I'm aware of or have heard of, that are like
everybody's just playing complimentary football then, because they're 26 in the country in run defense. I mean, like this is
playing their asses off.
So you can say there's not a lot of talent there. They do have spurts where, like, hey, bro, that South Carolina offensive line, you had a really good week last week. Just all things considered for you. All right, you're going to find out and play around with that defensive line at Vandy and see what happens.
Right. No, that's my whole point, is that none of it makes sense. And I think that what makes this game so unpredictable is that South Carolina, they're locked in. They're bouncing back after the big win, and they're ready to carry the momentum and energy. They beat Vandy. But if they're just the slightest bit distracted, Vanderbilt wins.
Is Scorpio right here?
No. You do it sometimes, but I don't.
Yeah, I didn't think that was me either. Okay.
All right, we got one more to get in here before we get out of here. You
Oh,
have a show after this, right?
yes. What was the next game?
Texas, Florida.
My bad. Texas and Florida this weekend, Joe. Florida coming off a really tough loss against Georgia. Texas trying to get some of the stink off of them after a Georgia loss. Your thoughts going into this game?
First of all, if this game's close, then it's very, very concerning for Texas, because you're going up against, for 4 quarters, a guy who was on Yale's roster last year who didn't even play. A kid who joined this coaching staff, transferred from Yale, was not even the starter for Yale last year. Aiden Warner did a couple of nice things, but didn't exactly take over. It was the run game. It was the defensive performance by Florida. My biggest thing, this is an opportunity for Texas to continue to reestablish themselves after it feels like they lost their footing from the Georgia game. You know what? One thing for me that's been really odd, Blake, for this Texas team, we talked a lot in the offseason, and a lot of people have hyped up what this passing attack can be. Their leading receiver this year is Gunnar Helm, who's their tight end with 419 yards. Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden, who have made some really big plays, like they are not the reason, are behind him with 380 and 332. I need to see in this game that they, outside of trying to get the run game going against a team that has a bad run defense, connect with your receivers more. Like, I feel like they have lost some of their juice in the passing attack that looked like it was going to be so prolific in the first couple of weeks.
Here's the interesting thing about this one in reference to Warner. Did you hear Billy Napier today saying that the DJ Lagway injury was far less severe than they even anticipated, that no, he's not going to be out for the season, and that he's not already technically out against Texas. Now, Billy can be playing some matchups.
That would be some serious gymnastics if he was doing that, which would be pretty funny.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I fully agree. And here's the truth. You don't need to play him regardless. Like, don't make an injury worse. Like, don't play him because you got to save your job here. You know, like, don't do that. It's what it kind of felt like a little bit to some extent, but not completely. I mean, Billy did kind of sell it. He kind of said, like, hey, man, I mean, it was her, but it's like, it's not like a tear or anything, you know, like, so again, we'll see. However, you are correct. I think Texas has got to get off to a really good start here. You know what would get the Georgia loss stank off of them? If you do something that Georgia couldn't and go out there and you beat the dog shit out of Florida. That's what could really do it. Be like, all right, you caught us, but we responded against Florida. So I still see a Florida team, though, man, that I get what you're saying. I know Warner's going to probably or likely, we talk about this on a Monday, might play. Man, I don't know how much I trust Texas at the current moment, if I'm being real with you. Like, are they probably going to win this game? Yeah. There's a lot of things that I probably think is going to happen in this game. But why do I feel like that they're not going to ever truly separate? Like, I feel like they're never
because they've done that all year. They've done that all year. They've played around with their food in some matchups. Like the Vanderbilt game is a game that they should have quickly separated, and they didn't.
Well, I mean, again, that game specifically comes off another Quinn Ewers turnover. How many times are you going to have a turnover and the team goes right around, you give them full momentum and they score? Then what was it, a pick six? Then a pick six or something like that? I forget how that game started off. Maybe it was Alabama that was the pick six. Maybe I'm misremembering.
Yeah.
Okay. Regardless, I know that Ewers either led off the game with an interception. They go down and score against Vandy. They lose against win for 3 against Vandy. Good for you. But they're still much better athletes on Florida that actually care about playing for Billy. Joe, you don't stay as close in that game like you did last week if you hate your coach. Sorry, you don't. I mean,
that is true.
You could say whatever you want about Billy. That locker room at this current moment has not just fallen off on him. Phil, you know what it feels like to me? Remember when Jordan Travis went down last year?
Yes.
Everybody was playing for that team. Nobody was taking it. Now you got to.
Well, very, very different. One team was still in a national championship.
Yeah, very different. Very different defenses, very different team. Philosophy still the same. I can tell when effort and buy-ins on a program in a culture. And that's what Florida has. Make what you want about them. You're probably going to win the football game. You're probably going to win it big. All right? You go ahead and play around with them if you want to. Go right on ahead. Because you get in a game like this and a team like this, Joe, not when you're doing what you're doing against Vandy. You make stupid mistakes, you're going to win stupid prizes. Joe, they still ran the football on Georgia, even though DJ Lagway was out. They still were lining up and running it right at them, and they couldn't do shit about it. And that's Georgia. Like, this is a big deal. It's not like they were doing that against Kansas State or some stupid shit. They were literally lining it up and saying, Georgia will come right at you. Don't play around with them. You better take them very seriously.
Right. And before we get out of here, like, that's something that we see all the time with these teams that are just upset machines. I mean, South Carolina did it. We're not upset machines, but scrappy and playing opponents closer than everybody expected. This is a team that is fighting a lot more than everybody thought that they were going to be. Way more. And if Texas comes out goofing around and they're not seeing it as an opponent that they should be dominating, you're right. But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't. I think that Texas is going to play really good football. You mentioned it's November. It's the most important month of the year. Teams have to play their best football, and they need to be firing on all cylinders. And this is a game where they're going to need to be locked in.
Better. You better. I'm not playing with this one. So we'll see. All right. We'll see y'all on Tuesday night. We're not live, but we'll post our other games and other segments here. We will still be doing that tomorrow. I don't know.
Yes.
I know the selection committee. We got to talk about that. I have nothing else. I know about nothing else being big tomorrow. So Ruffino and Joe show is the biggest thing that will be happening in the country tomorrow. We'll see y'all then. Y'all have a good one. Peace.